Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are here on YouTube and you see a little link below, you can jump to Zoom. If you see it in Zoom, you can jump to Mukana, and that's where you can ask questions and you can chat with everybody else. It's best to ask questions early so that we can kind of figure out how we're going to get through them all. So do it either before the show or right here in the first couple minutes is the best time to ask those questions. And then if you see questions that you like, make sure to vote on them. Now, if you see questions that you thought you could have answered, maybe even better than we could, we'd love to have you on the panel. Come join us. All you have to do is be here a little early, 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And but once we start doing the mic checks, we're pretty much done. Done for the, and that's going to be the size of our panel for the day. So come here at 6:40. If you're not sure if your kit is ready to go, then come a little earlier. We open the doors at 6 o'clock. We start doing mic checks, but we also talk about a lot of other things. No promises, but that's what we're kind of working our way through. So we'd love to have you come in. You can check your kit then, and then again join us for the actual conversation. Now today, second hour, first hour is all general conversation. Anything you have, any question you have about media or virtual production. The second hour is usually something that we want to spend a little bit more time on. And so today we're going to talk about award shows. We had the Grammys last night. We'll talk about the Grammy production, production values compared to other ones, and what we think of it. And just think about awards in general. I think a couple of us are working on award shows, so we're all thinking about it and we're all watching all of the ones that go by. Tomorrow we're going to talk about acoustics. Like really just treating the walls, treating the things around you. So rather than mics or other things, I think that's one instrument that we don't pay enough attention to. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. We'll talk about monitors on Wednesday. Richard Mueller's got a couple of them sitting within arm's reach. And so we're going to talk about what he's got there and what makes a production monitor what it is. Thursday, we're going to talk about building digital first events. So we've kind of kicked around. We talked about digital first events. We talked about pre-production, but what does it really take? What are the mechanics of putting it together? On Friday, we're going to continue our AWS tour of what we've been working on. So that'll be part 2 of 4. Part 1 was amazing. The team really put together an incredible presentation. And then on Saturday, of course, we have education for 2 hours, and then Resolve from 10 to 11. And then we're going to talk, we might have something special at noon. I have to say that Saturday was kind of amazing. How many people were here on Saturday that were part of so Jonas came in and we had his Raspberry Pis, his Playoutbee, and a bunch of us got together. And I have to admit that when Guy brought it up, I was like, it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time, but I was like, this could be really a train wreck, like of us all trying to figure this out. And so I figured, we'll put it on a Saturday. We'll see how it goes. And it was amazing. If you have the opportunity to go back and look, if you weren't here, definitely go back and look at that and just watch a little bit of it. There's something about it. By the way, my Playoutbee is still, running. So that's what we built on. That was the video that I was playing out from Playoutbee. I want to see how long it'll go. So it's just there. He's still cooking. Anyway, there was something about, I don't know for anybody else what the experience was, but there was something about that of all of us working together that was profound. You had a bunch of people with multi-camera setups, which I think is part of it. And then we all know each other pretty well, which is another part of it. So there's a whole bunch of things that couldn't have been done until now. But I think that us working together on a problem, over a long period of time, it kind of shifted a lot of things, I think, about how we might do some more training on Saturdays. Any other input? Did you guys have any? I know we've talked about a bunch in the pre-show and the pre-show. So, but anybody else have any notes of things that they noticed in that? Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
I'm sorry I missed it. I really am. I really am. That's all I can say. But I want to go back and watch it.
It was really, really interesting. There were a lot of people with different skill levels, and everyone was kind of just explaining it to everybody else. And there were things that even at first I was like, oh, I'll do it along. This is going to be kind of a mess. Then I immediately got within the first 5 minutes, this was not going to be a mess. This is going to be amazing. Then I was like, I'm just going to sit back and watch it. And then I couldn't. I had to do it, and so it was a very interesting thing. I was excited. I was like, this is going to be the easiest time to ever get this done because you've got a whole bunch of people able to answer your questions and everything else. And so one of the things I talked about with Nick's going to be doing Nick is going to be doing Unreal Engine on in April. And I think what we're going to do is kind of use the learnings from this to shift it around a little bit, where you get movies ahead of time. There's some Q&A and introduction, and then a lot of us just doing Unreal and talking about it and like having a wider gap. I think it's the next level of just Q&A. We'll definitely have that as well, but in the middle of us actually just sitting there noodling around with the app and the hardware and everything else. So I think that it's going to be an interesting, I'm going to try not to add too many things at one time. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, the one thing that we also noticed, I also noticed, was it would have been, if we can actually switch it to something with a room, it would have been nice to have a separate room. So if somebody got into some real deep water,
Yep.
they could go with somebody else and do the more focused troubleshooting from there. Otherwise, yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was I watched a lot of it myself. It was just amazing how people how we perceive how to build something as simple as a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, and I'm torn between the separate rooms and not. I've been thinking about that all weekend. There is an advantage of listening to everyone learn how to do it that I undervalued, I think, of listening to a teacher explain to someone and have to back up and talk about what that might be and troubleshoot it. That I think you do need, I agree with you that I think we do need rooms. If someone gets really stuck, we just need to move them to somewhere where we can keep moving. But I also think that there is a value to all of us to some degree of all listening to the answers. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. Even though people were two or three steps ahead, like Courtney made a mention about, when you put the Pi into the lower part of the case, you need to tuck this end in first. Even though I wasn't at that step, the fact that I heard that information and I knew I was coming up to it helped me focus on it. And then when I got there, it's like, oh, thank you.
Yeah. It was an advantage. It was definitely an advantage that some people like Courtney and other folks had done it already or been ahead of it. It was also a huge advantage to have Jonas there, so because he was able to, you have the developer sitting there able to talk. And I think it was useful for him as far as understanding where we were getting stuck. Go ahead, John, and then Courtney. Oh, you're muted, John.
Double mute, John.
It's not a Zoom
maybe
mute.
his battery is gone. No, I was just going to say what you just said is it's useful also for the developer because he finds out what, people who are newbies installing their software, what roadblocks they're going to run into and how he can improve the product to make it easier to assemble and set up,
Yeah, and I think that there is, when we think about the cycle of learning, there is this, if you build videos that show people how to do something and then they all go do it, you can update the videos based on what people, oh, by the way, don't do this, like we saw this going and, doing like a live activation of a training first before you do the video. There's this like chicken or egg thing where you want to send everybody videos on how to get started, but you want to see what their questions are too, like how they get stuck. So I think there's a little bit of both. Go ahead, John.
I think I'm working now.
Yep.
I think the fact that we knew each other, I mean, there was a point where Roscoe had a problem. And then I came with that one. And I was say, hey, Roscoe, how did you solve that? And then you had a problem with the internet, with the air gap, and I had that exact problem. But I think that the breaking into the room, I've had two people reach out to me who had watched the video and said, I had the same problem you talked about. How did you get past it?
Yeah.
And they said they looked at the video and it wasn't obvious, but they could have looked at it more, I think, and it would have been more obvious, but it was easier to DM me in Discord to say, you had that problem, you fix it. And I was able to send him a note and he fixed it.
Yeah, and I do think that this applies to, it's really great to do it with physical things, but it also applies to learning. If we all wanted to learn 3D modeling or coding or other things together, I think that there's a way for us to kind of figure this out. I do think that there's going to be new tools or kits or something that we have to think about for people to participate. There's going to be, it's not just broadcast kits, it's like participation kits. They can be as simple as webcams and as complicated as Blackmagic, but like kits that you can just order that will have you be able to be part of the classes at different price levels.
That was the amazing thing. I set a camera and had the box laid out. Guy in it, and I talked before this, what should we do and look at. I had no idea there would be that many people who had multiple cameras set up on top of it. There must have been at least 8 or 9 of us that had.
I think it was more than that. I think it was 10 or 15 people that had more than one camera that they were using or were coming in separately or whatever. And then Mickey's cutting between all of that. And It doesn't mean that everybody has to do that. The one thing we didn't do is also have Makana open. So I think that if we open that up, then people who aren't on the video can just be asking questions. And I just forgotten to unlock I had locked it earlier and we weren't really encouraging people to do that. But I think that we could do that where you'd have, 50 people on the, inside on video, or maybe 30 people with camera, multi-camera and everything else, and 200 or 300 watching, asking questions and interacting with each other. I think there's a lot of, and then the questions could bubble up, and then we can still be doing it in front of people and figuring it all out. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, that social component that you were just discussing is what I've observed the natural instinct of Roscoe and John as teachers / moderators. They're observing the whole group, and then they're pinpointing the questions. Also, the that interactivity of how do you ask a question and how do you get into a breakout room when everybody's going really at it with so to have that back channel or intentional connectivity through just say a thing in chat and we'll take you into another room. That way you don't interrupt the flow of like you're me now.
Well, I think that what you want is to eventually, the second time you do it, the first time you do it is one group, and the second time you do it, you come around and you have people just in rooms. So some people don't have to say, let's go to a room and, and work through this. So there's just 3 or 4 people or 2 or 3 people that are in the rooms just hanging out. And if you want some specific help, you just jump into one of those, and go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah. The how to find your IP address room. I mean, if you're not getting into your router all the time, and thankfully I had the Eero, and this is an argument, buy an Eero because it has a little app. I could look it up and found it. But if I had to dig into the AT&T router.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Actually, the first one we've dealt with today, Ray Franklin of Mount Dora says, how could a client use their existing Logitech webcam into an ATEM Mini without adding another computer? Thanks.
Go ahead, Jason.
You can't.
Yep, that's the answer. I mean, you can take it apart and try to convert it to HDMI, but with that, you need something that's going to read USB and turn it into, I don't think there's anything that's a dongle that does that. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Mickey. Real quick.
There is a dongle. I can't remember that. It starts with an
Really?
F. Some guy actually made it. I think it's just a Pi where it converts the USB to HDMI as a capture for Roy or something like that. I'll look it up and put it in Mukana.
Okay.
The link.
All right. Very good, Mickey, and then John.
Yeah, there's I think Eric Hall, who used to join us, was using a Raspberry Pi at some point, and also I remember Guy showing us like a $400 or $500 box that did it.
It's like you can get a new camera for the price of the adapter, so it was like $250 or $300. It was like, why?
Right, exactly. Go ahead, John.
That was what I was going to say. For the price, you could buy the camera.
There's a lot of good cameras for that price in that price range to use that I would recommend. I mean, they're not that good. I mean, they're webcam. They really are just webcams. So they're better than a lot of things. But I think I would go for something that you could buy a used HV20 that would probably look better than most of those. Next question.
Which is pretty high rated, and it's probably one of our more philosophical. Roscoe Jones says, regarding John Edelson, in an astoundingly prophetic essay published in Science in 1995, Eli Noam wrote, in the past, people came to the information which was stored at the university. In the future, the information will come to the people wherever they are. What then is the role of the university? And he has a note there to a full article in Discord.
Sky.
Well, again, it's a gathering. Oh dear.
I can hear you.
Oh, it's a gathering place. If again, I go back to Chris's word, affinity group. It's a consortium of like minds trying to solve a similar problem. So
like we did on Saturday for free.
But the physical buildings, I think were an after effect of people gathering. We didn't start in buildings.
Good, Stephen, and then Bill, and then JJ, and then Chris.
Well, a lot of the university is for research too. I mean, you kind of get into the problem of one-way teaching, but most like Berkeley, it's research, and everybody is trying to do it, even undergraduates. So that's the real reason for the top end.
And Bill, and then JJ.
I don't know. I would imagine that a lot of people had the experience I did, which is when I went away to college. It was my first. You're leaving home. You're learning a ton of lessons that have nothing to do with your classes. You're learning socialization, how to get along with strangers, how to not be under the wing of your parents, and how to really cooperate in circumstances that really help you in the business world later. As you get out and learn to make money, you're in groupings, and if you don't learn those social skills and figure that out somewhere. And if we don't have that kind of communal college experience or something similar to a trade school, whatever, I'm not sure how that function gets taken place of that difference.
For 2 million years, it got taken place by just being socialized with the community that you were with the whole time, not going to somewhere else. I mean, I spent a lot of time working for Sony, and all I did was work on campuses. And I have to admit that it greatly soured my opinion of universities, in that I really view large universities as Lord of the Flies. You know, a whole bunch of people at the same age that are trying to figure stuff out should not be put into one place. You know, like, you know, and you know, it was.
I got to push back a little at that, though, because I know a lot of people who their lifelong friendships that have helped them tremendously.
But we have that
in those years.
But you have that where
not
you
always,
live too.
Not always.
You find friends wherever you find them. You know, but the thing is that it was, now we have a global way to do that. We've all found friends online. You know, and I'm not clear that anyway. So I have to think about it too as my kids get older, about where they're going to go, and I'm much more interested in them finding ways to get back to this, to be in university. But not necessarily leave their community. Go ahead, JJ, and then Chris.
So quick answer to the first part is creating a sanctuary space, which, but that said, I think that we probably at this stage in our COVID, at this stage in this period of time wherein we've now started to become accustomed to being isolated in a particular location, and then creating input that hopefully creates affinity groups where we can meet with each other. I commented earlier today that this place has become a sanctuary space because there are folks who are trying to help the lowest common denominator, make sure they come up to where everyone else is, and it takes some work to do that. But as a person's developing, the various norms, there are some folks who will show up here on occasion, and they just haven't developed certain social skills such that they're doing this the entire time that we're talking to each other, and all you see is the forehead. And those folks, I would argue, haven't developed some of the same social skills that we take advantage of now as people who are of a different age, how to communicate and how to talk that uses more of this rather than this. The kinesthetic learners out there in the world, they'll need a sanctuary location to go, especially with the shifts in what is acceptable.
It's just a different set of people.
And I would say, though, also to support the idea of the large campus, I was fortunate in going to a campus with smaller class sizes. You know, and because I went to a liberal arts university, the classes, they were like 6, 8.
I don't.
And that made it a huge waste.
Super
of budget,
painful to me.
But
like the
great.
idea, I think that. And anyway, this is probably an education conversation. We'll move through it really quickly. Go ahead, Chris, and then Courtney, and then John.
Yeah, I'm pretty much anti-formal education. I think a little bit like you, Alex, and I think it's a great way for parents to sink a whole bunch of money.
And I don't want to say I'm not anti-formal education. I'm just not willing to take it for granted. Like, take it like this is just the way it should be. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Exactly.
I think there's a lot of people that actually need the structure of a university to get forward. You know, because they need that structure. They need the piece of paper. They need all the things. It does make a difference in their benefit. And there's people that doesn't need. It doesn't mean that it's one or the other. It's both, because there's absolutely people who need the structure to get through the process, and then there's people who can't deal with the structure. Go ahead, Courtney, and then John.
Well, one thing nobody's mentioned yet that ties into what Stephen said about the research is if you're in a technical field like medicine or chemistry or electronics or, you know, television production, you get a chance to, you know, for the really well-endowed universities, you get a chance to work with millions of dollars worth of equipment that you could never work with at home, and research equipment and scientific equipment that universities have a plethora of, and it lets you work with that without being in a employment situation where one mistake, you know, could end your career. So it lets you learn on the big boys' equipment, you know. So there's that.
Yeah, John.
So Roscoe took one quote out of the article that I posted that I thought was very interesting. It would start discussion, and I thought it would be a longer discussion in the education hour. Excuse me. But the title of the article is Academics Aren't Content Creators, and it's regressive to make them so. So I thought that would be an interesting discussion, considering some of the things we've talked about content creation. So it's a very well written article for starting discussions, and that's what we professors like to do, is challenge people. So I recommend on Saturday in the education hour people read this article, and we could continue this discussion.
Yeah, it sounds good. I agree. Next question.
Brian Carpenter of Cleveland, Ohio says, when requisitioning a new notebook PC from my employer during work from home era, do I focus on CPU or GPU specs when using Teams, Outlook, OBS for flipping a teleprompter, and DSL capture software?
Jason.
Okay, I guess I'll address those one at a time. Let's see. So Teams, Outlook, and Teams and Outlook would be mostly CPU, and OBS would almost certainly be GPU, and same with DSL capture. So yeah, it's both.
All right, next question.
Doug Ferguson, Fort Wayne, Indiana, says best VHS transfer service. Go.
Oh. I think it depends on, I mean, the one that most of the folks that I know of that doesn't need to be reconstructed, like actually rebuild the tapes, is Scan Cafe, is probably one of the more popular ones. But I'm not sure. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, I was going to say the time-based correctors are going to be critical, just probably because of the age of the tape also. So the Panasonic AG 1970s had like 17 lines of TBC built in, but then there are full frame time-based correctors. So I would look, I mean, I know that's getting technical, but I would look for a facility that has it so that you get good, clean transfers.
Next question. Go ahead, Sky, real quick. Sorry,
I've just seen those ads come through on Facebook that say, put all of your stuff into the box and send it off. And I think the last one I saw said Kodak on it. So I would say, look for Kodak, and they'll send you a box. You put all your stuff in a box and it comes back on a stick or something.
Next question.
Digital of your choice.
Matt Sloan of Phoenix, Arizona says, how does the panel power on their setup each morning for Zoom? I feel very low tech manually turning on each LED light and the Pocket 6K. What are the recommended ways to streamline this?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I say LA, Studio B on, LA being my term for my Echo, so it doesn't activate yours.
Right. Yeah, mine. I have a HomeKit, basically a HomeKit outlet that everything goes. I don't have enough. The lights are not enough draw that I can just have them all in one place, and I can just turn them all on and off from my phone. I don't say anything, but it works well. Jason, and then Bill.
Yeah, the studio always stays on, but as far as the lighting, that goes through a Stream Deck, and the rest of it is just HomeKit. So it's just one rack at a time, and each outlet can just turn stuff on. So yeah, just hey Shlomo, do this, smart. And it goes ding 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 ding.
Yeah, smart. A smart outlet is pretty useful, or at least one with a switch that is where all the other power goes. Bill.
I use an Eliminator E107. It's a rack mount set of switches. It's got, I think, 12 switches, and everything is plugged into that. And every morning I come in here and I just hit the first 6 switches and everything comes to life.
Next question.
Matt Sloan of Phoenix says, that's the one we just finished. So Courtney Gooden here in Hollywood, they're in Hollywood, and the panel, as I was trying NDI for the first time, it worked great over Wi-Fi. Then Windows did an update, and now I can't see any other NDI sources on the network. Any ideas?
Windows did an update, and then it didn't work. I'm so surprised. Anyway, so Jeffrey and then Jason.
Check your firewall. If Windows didn't update, the firewall might have reset, and you might have to reset the permissions on your NDI.
Jason.
MIMO is almost certainly the culprit here, whether it's on your router or our software side. If you open a terminal and just say release all and then renew all, ipconfig/release all and then renew all, that might work.
Thanks for the suggestions. I'll try.
Next question.
Ruben Marchena of Grand Rapids, Michigan says, what can I control with my brand new DYS Pi 4 computer? Ideas.
Now everybody's got a Pi. They're trying to figure out what to do with it. So I think that we talked to Jonas about it a little bit. We are going to brainstorm around things that we can do with our Pis now that we have them, and maybe even some more lab sessions on Saturdays. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Stream Deck. Add Stream Deck to your Pi, and you have a remote Stream Deck.
I was realizing that I think that the Pi should almost be powerful enough. I mean, if Unity had a Pi version, you could almost put Unity on it because Unity is so light as far as what it does, but I don't think there's a Pi version for it. Anything else? Any other? Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, there's one thing called decaffeine that's freeware right now. NDI to HDMI adapter is what I'm going to try next to load up on mine. So I bought two. I bought the one that Victor bought too. It's this one here with the keyboard built in. So I'm going to turn this into an NDI to HDMI. So that'll be, $99 for this. So normally one of those adapters goes for $495 from Bird Dog. So
and do they come with a keyboard? No, they don't come. They don't come with a keyboard.
Yeah, that's true. Well, once it's on, it's going to be headless because I'll just control it over the network. Right. Yeah.
No, that's good. That's a great one. Roscoe.
Yep. There we go. This isn't really control, but I'm very interested in putting in Aaron Parecki's Raspberry Pi as a stream bridge. It basically mimics the streaming bridge, and you can tell the ATEM can talk to it. It can only obviously do HDMI out, not SDI, but I'll put the link in.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. Next question.
Guy Cochran of Seattle says, what can we do to get inexpensive tally lights for cameras to help talent or hosts know which camera is currently active?
Go ahead, Jason.
Guy, I don't know if you've played with World Tally, but it's really cool. It's slightly expensive. I think you have to pay for it per session, but it's the same guys that do the picture-in-picture ATEM iPad app that we like. But yeah, World Tally is pretty cool.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Going back to Parecki, he did something with a Pi. Speaking of Pis, did something with a Pi, and I think it was M5. Where they bought those little devices where he could create tally lights from.
And I think Unity has a tally as well. So Unity has a whole tally system built into it that I think interacts with GPIO. Of course, Scarhoy does their own tallies. And one of the things that we're looking at is building tallies inside of Arduino. That's something we were discussing in the pre-show. So I think there's a couple different, ways of managing that. Those are the other ones that I know of anyway. Next question.
Talak Miguel Lopez Waterman, our friend, says in New York, do those that edit professionally use a proxy workflow for 4K or other high resolution work, or do they just have huge workstations?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yes, everybody I know who, if you're dealing with footage that's straining your computer, you move to proxy. I do think Final Cut kind of pioneered this. Their proxy system, when it came out 10 years ago, was so seamless that you work in one mode. When you decide you need to switch, it's literally a click and suddenly you're in the other mode. So you can work in proxy and then you say, I need to look at full frame, full resolution. You click the button, you look at it for a little bit, you go back if you're dropping frames. It's just that easy. So there's no reason not to work in proxy.
Go ahead, Mickey, and then Sky.
Yeah, I agree that it depends on your machine, but it also highly depends on what codec you're working with. If you're working with RAW, most of the time you're gonna end up working with proxy. But if you're doing ProRes and with 4K footage, as long as your drive is fast enough, ProRes is very light on CPU and GPU.
Go ahead, Sky.
So that's how I've been living for the last 20 years, is in that process of workflow, because we didn't used to have the powerful machines and the codecs were very large and heavy. So yes, that's where back to that GPU or CPU question. And yes, also in Premiere, there is that ability to make proxies of the media. And then there's a one-click button of look at it as proxy or go full screen on it when you want to online it. So as what I used to do.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on, Craig K of Toronto says, with the ATEM Mini Pro with 2 USB drives connected, can the local record out be set to record to both or auto span from one to the next drive, or is it only manual selection?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
it can't be set to automatically record to both. Using the hub protocol, you can by default, it will span from one disk to the next, but built into the HyperDeck protocol, which is what the ATEM Mini, all the ATEM Minis are built on, you can actually hold the record button on the HyperDeck, and also on the ATEM Mini, you can hold it and it'll blink for a second and then it will jump to the next disk. So if you want to decide where that span happens, that's how to do it.
And this is between the two USB drives that you can span it?
You have to plug in a hub. This was the first ATEM Mini demo, and it was part of the demo. But yes, you can plug a hub in and have two drives, and just like the HyperDeck with two SD cards or two SSDs. Same.
Interesting. That's interesting. Next question.
JJ McKenna, Santa Venetia, Lower Scabble, says, is there a repository for Zoom coupons somewhere? Perhaps any good aggressive sales representatives? One particular.
I feel like this was. Didn't we have this question before? We can't keep.
Is one particular panel that wasn't present last time this was asked, but yeah.
We can't. I don't. Go ahead, John.
If you're not for profit, there's a group called TechSoup. And it's not only Zoom, but they do aggregating of services and do discounts if they want that.
Okay. Next question.
Greg G, Topping, Virginia, says from Mic Checks, best ATEM Mini settings for Pile Pro, and he has the model number PMHMS20, directly into the Mini. So simple and sounds good. So that looks like a comment more than a question.
I don't know if that was a question or a comment, or is that a question of how to get it to do that? Who has the Pile Pro? Who's using the Pile Pro right now?
Is that the one that John Edelson was talking about? No, John's on DPA, so that's not it.
Yep.
It ends as a comment more than a question. So should we just move on, Alex?
Yep. Next question.
Claudio from Rome is up next with question for the Playoutbee. If I'm still in time, I'm interested to know if multiple Raspberry Pi can play out different parts of a video in sync somehow to be part of a bigger LED wall. In another word, can multiple Raspberry Pis be used like a simple signage for an LED wall?
I don't think that they're I don't think that they're complex enough yet. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, if you need it to look like it's a seamless single image, you're not going to get that because there's no gen lock with the Raspberry Pi.
Right. Yep. Next question.
Claudio and Rome is back with another one. It would be nice if there was a schedule or program for the future Unreal Engine class that will be held. What we need to know, prepare, how questions would be possible insert in the class, and so forth. So he's just looking for how it's going to be set up.
It's going to be the first Saturday of April, starting at 10 a.m., 10 to 11:30, and we'll get started there. Nick's going to post some videos beforehand, and we're going to be kind of building up a set. And so but a lot of it will be experiential. We'll do it all together. So that's kind of our plan based on Saturday. Next question.
JJ McKenna's back with what's an easy-to-use Windows replacement for moving graphics and text as we talk about using Keynote for. So our placement Keynote on the PC.
PowerPoint. I think that I don't know of any other. PowerPoint's the most developed that would do the same thing. You would, if you were going to use it the way we were talking about Keynote with graphics, you would do it over black and you would do a Luma key and it will animate as best it can. I find that the playback is not as smooth as Keynote most of the time. So it's a little out. Keynote has a better engine. And for some reason its kerning is better. There's something about the way that Keynote anti-aliases and kerns and spaces that is better than the other platforms. And I realized that's why it's one of the contributing factors to why Keynote decks look better than everybody else's is something about the way it manages text is better. Like there's a little bit more refinement there. And because I was trying to look at I built the same slide in PowerPoint slides and Keynote and it looked better with the same text. And I was like, what is going on? And it just looks better because of the way the anti-aliasing and the way it's being processed. And it has nothing to do with and then I was like, oh man, that's a rough one. I just did this a couple weeks ago and I was just because I was trying to figure this out, but you take the same fonts and you put them in the same things and it's being treated better. in Keynote? Jeffrey and then Guy.
So Prezi has created a new version of Prezi. It's called Prezi for Video. And what it does is allows you to bring it into things like your
That's interesting.
conference calls and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and then go from there.
That's very cool. Guy.
Yeah, if Chuck Wojak was on here, he'd be singing the praises of ProPresenter because he's the man on that, and it is pretty impressive all the demos that he's given on AV Tech Talks, where he's got stuff that blows away Keynote. So, but it's expensive. It's $399, mostly geared towards the House of Worship crowd, but also great for business and corporate events. So take a look at it. ProPresenter. I'll put a link in the chat.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking in the same price range. There's definitely, if you want lots of graphics moving around, there's a lot of options. ProPresenter is a great one. MIDI, QLab, you start getting into all of those will do motion graphics. It's just a matter of whether it's as inexpensive or as easy to use. Next question.
Larry Engelhardt of Chicago says, I want to use OBS to alternately feed some slides and a website to Zoom. I created OBS virtual camera, but in Zoom, the image was grossly distorted. The slide looked stretched and only the left half of the image appeared in Zoom. What am I missing?
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would double check that your canvas size is a proper 16:9 ratio, and that it is 720p or 1080p depending on what you're sending out.
Next question.
Joshua Kuhn of Spartanburg, South Carolina says, outside of hiring someone on the panel for an hour, what are some good getting started guides for Dante?
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Take the Dante certification courses. They're free on Audinate's website.
Definitely the best. And they do a pretty good job of it, of working people through it. Next question.
Robert A. Ober of Houston, Texas. Anybody see the Formula One TV stream of the testing over the weekend? Amateur hour at some points.
I don't know if we saw it. Yeah, didn't see it. Next question.
Lansing Pugh of Austin, Texas says, I watched a lot of office hours and somehow missed the discussion of camera placement in relationship to monitor placement. Most of the panel members aren't looking into the camera, which seems a bit odd considering how hard you try to have an optimum face-to-face simulation.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
We're waiting for the manufacturer to build the monitor with the camera right in the middle. Other than that, we all have to build teleprompters, and we don't like glass in our houses that can break.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Jason.
Yeah, for me, I have a 50-inch monitor right behind my camera, so now I'm looking directly at my camera. But if I have to look at somebody like John or JJ, as you notice, I'm looking upward. So it's really about that placement of unless you have a teleprompter.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, stay tuned. The right way to do this is a teleprompter, straight up.
Go ahead, Bill, and then Kai.
Yeah, I actually have a teleprompter. My issue is that when I'm looking at the teleprompter, I am seeing directly into the camera. But when you're kind of managing some other stuff, I have to look at the panel down here. Questions are over there. And then a feed, if I want to bring in, is over there. So I find myself getting distracted from, I have to do a better job of training myself when you're talking, talk to the audience. It's hard to do. And I actually may use an old technique I did back in the early days, which is to literally put a picture up somewhere and talk to that person, because it's hard to train yourself to that.
Good Guy.
Yeah, I have a teleprompter and I can look dead down the center, but it's only 1920 by 1080, and we have a lot going on behind the scenes where we're reading the chat and it just doesn't all fit on one monitor. So I'm just looking at gallery view. I look at the active speaker dead down the center, and then I have in Mukana for panelists, we actually have a teleprompter view, so I can see all the upcoming questions on the right, but it's hard to just look dead down the center for the entire show without having to look at chat and other things that are going on and Discord and getting pinged. So it's tough. You should try it sometime.
Go ahead, JJ, and then John.
Sorry, I was picking John to go first. So I noticed this weekend I tried to have in a face-to-face conversation a eye-to-eye conversation. And having looked at some of the research that's been done into eye-to-eye conversation, it ends up becoming, to some degree, more intimate than you're comfortable with. If you were just looking straight into the camera at all times. So I think that while we try to get really close to eye, having not quite eye to eye or full face conversation is to a large degree more comfortable because we're being natural rather than being unnaturally looking in somebody's eyes.
Oh no, I look into people's eyes a lot when I talk to them in person. So I mean, it's kind of my experience anyway. I mean, generally most speakers are taught to look in people's eyes pretty intently. I mean it's kind of being good at that is in person is kind of a superpower. So while people aren't comfortable with it, I can tell you that it's much more effective. And so people who get over that can get a lot more done. When they can keep eye to eye contact the whole time. John.
There's a little plexiglass camera holder that is being sold now that you put over your monitor and lets you set the camera like a Brio right in the center. But for me, when I got the ATEM Mini Pro, I started using my old ATEM Mini as a switcher for my teleprompter, because if you have a teleprompter but you have everything on the side, you're going to be checking that monitor and that monitor. So with the ATEM switcher, I can switch to the teleprompter monitor what I want to be looking at, whether it be a web page that I'm talking about or the person I'm talking to.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, so I'm going to cut to the view that I'm looking at down the center now. If I want to look at somebody full screen and look at them eye to eye, so again, gallery view on the left, so I can see what's going on. But then I'll kick it full screen, and I mean that's if you, Alex's head this is a 24-inch monitor, so it's like having him here in real life, larger than life. So it's kind of cool to have this setup, but this is like pretty expensive. This is going extreme. If you do this stuff all day, like 4, 6, 8 hours a day, it's kind of a nice setup to have, but it's truly a luxury. I mean, I'm lucky. We bought this teleprompter 10 years ago, and we've used it in the studio for years, and I just kind of took it home. So not everybody has that, though.
You knew somebody there who could make that decision.
Yeah, I might have known somebody who can let me borrow it for a while.
Next question.
Robert A. Ober of Houston, Texas. Good morning. What's the best way to get B video into Wirecast?
And this is I assume the Playoutbee video into Wirecast. So it's how do we get the HDMI, I think is really how to get the HDMI into Wirecast. Jeffrey?
Yeah, just like you would into an ATEM Mini, you'd feed the HDMI right into the, because I wasn't using my ATEM Mini at first during the thing. I was just putting it right into the capture card. So and it doesn't matter if it's vMix or Wirecast or OBS, just use a capture card.
Next question.
Chris Wilder of Lafayette, Indiana says, what's everyone's favorite current external portable HDMI recorder? Extra points if it has pass through.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Video Assist Blackmagic design, far and away.
Yeah. I mean, the range is quite amazing. From relatively inexpensive to the 12G one is just unbelievable what they packed into it, scopes, and the ability to basically turn it into a webcam. So what you're pushing is not just pass through. It's like you can plug it in and then plug the USB-C into your computer, and you basically have what you have with the switcher, but with a monitor. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I second the video assist. I've never seen anything that's quite as handy at a pinch. You can also do spot metering. You can go up to a rack, and if you've got the right cable, you can just plug in SDI, go all the way down a rack. It's absolutely the best.
You good, Courtney?
Yeah, I have mine plugged in right now, so I can't hold it up, but I have these little ones that I get for about $150. That if you don't have the $500 to $600 for the video assist, and the nice thing about the video assist is it'll record better, much higher quality bitrate MOV files. But if you're just looking for H.264, I'll find a link and I'll stick it in the chat to the cheap ones. And the nice thing about this one is it also passes. That was the output of it, briefly, because it's got my TiVo is plugged into it now, but it'll also pass HDCP, which some of the others won't. So if you want to hook it up to a Chromecast or something and use a link to that recorder and use it as a recorder out, if you hold down the record button for a long time, it'll turn off HDCP and allow the image to pass. It has HDMI pass through and records H.264 onto any USB key.
Yes, and thank you for putting that stuff in the Makana, because the answers coming with the questions is very helpful.
Next question.
Craig K of Toronto, Canada says on Saturday, someone mentioned that they had Zoom running on their new Raspberry Pi setup. What steps did you take to install it?
Zoom running on a Pi?
That's what the question says here. Or
I don't. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I don't know if it runs on a Pi, but if you go to the Zoom Help Center, they talk about how to put it on a Linux machine. So I think you could run Linux on a Pi or Pi-like computers. But Zoom can run in Linux. It's not only Mac and Windows.
I do think we can make a Pi, like a Apple Pie over Zoom, all together. Like the things we did on Saturday is applicable to so many things. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So yeah, I think it's me that I was talking about, because I did do a video a few months ago on how do you take one of these little cameras and put it onto your Pi and actually run Zoom. The only way to run Zoom on Pi is to use the web portal version, not the client, because that doesn't work. There's no client for it. So that might be what they were talking about.
Got it. Roscoe, did you have something to add? Yep.
Well, Jonas just posted that there is a native one. He says you also can run the native one on a Pi. I trust Jonas.
That's great. Next question.
Frank Berman of New York says, what's a reliable software or tool set to measure NDI traffic on my network so I don't saturate it? I'm running vMix on a 1 gig network with a few NDI sources, but I'm flying blind, not knowing how much advantage I can take, or if I'm getting close to the edge of the road and I'm going to drive off of it.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I would probably invest on a switch or other network infrastructure equipment that would allow you to measure it. Even switches at the mid-range give you bandwidth statistics.
Good guy.
Yeah, Jeff Keithley had mentioned that there's some NDI analysis software, and he said it wasn't for the faint of heart. So I downloaded it, and he's right; it's not for the faint of heart. So
what makes it not for the faint of heart?
It's all command line. It's all.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, it's there's no GUI, and so if you do the math, though, it's about for 1080p, it's like 150 or 125 megabits a second. So if you do the math between 1 gig, once you start hitting like 8, that you're going to saturate it, and then you can either get other NICs, a bigger switch, or you can do a 10G switch for your uplink, and then actually I even got some 5. So 10 gigs really expensive. What I did is get some 5 gig adapters, and I'm using those, and those seem to help. So it just depends on how many things you got going in or out. But math, I mean, it's just see what kind of signal it is and divide.
Right. Jason?
Best way that I've seen to do this is in a Ubiquiti switch. Ubiquiti switches have very easy to understand saturation. The real issue isn't bandwidth, it's internal capabilities. So the more ports you have on a switch, it's like a 2 to the X increase on what you need to have everything talk to everything else, and that's where you're going to run into problems. So I've had good luck with the Ubiquiti line.
Go, JJ.
Yeah, the issue there is backplane, and when you're speccing out a switch, any kind of switch, you want to verify that, and that's why a lot of folks will use Cisco in the networking world, because the backplane of the device, no matter how many ports it has on it, has to have enough memory for it to be able to take those packets and switch them, and which further goes to what in a large design, you want to make sure you have enough switches to manage the amount of memory, and to make sure a switch does switching, router does routing, firewall does firewalling. Separate your devices.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, and the other thing is NDI can be really chatty, and so the best thing that I've done is just put a NDI discovery server, which is something you can do with a Raspberry Pi. I'm using an old $100 laptop right behind me, and I've got 16 NDI devices. And what you do is you go into Access Manager and you just point them all, and under the Advanced tab, you just point them all to the IP address of the discovery server software, which is located in the SDK on the NDI NewTek NDI tool site.
Next question.
Comes from JJ McKenna here on the panel from Santa Venetia on the You Bet Your Life show with Groucho Marx. What were the tall, thin microphones that were used at the time? I think I knew at one point, but I can't remember. 18, were they?
JJ asking the pressing question of the day.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mickey.
I have no idea, but I would probably think it might be something by RCA. What other brands were? When was this? In the 70s?
Oh, no. Way earlier than that. This was the late 50s, early 60s. And Groucho Marx used to use an RCA 44 in all his publicity pictures, but I think you're talking about the Let's Make a Deal. Was it Monty Hall microphone, that really long, thin, with a little button capsule on top of it?
Oh, like the Price is Right mic, like the
Right, that
tiny
kind of
little,
thing. Is that it, JJ?
Yeah, these right here. Oops, these right here. Those the 1951 versions where they were previously. Sorry, this might have gone too far. These microphones right here. They had three, and then they switched to larger RCA mics. But I thought they were really awesome, and they worked really well for picking up voice for the form factor.
Yeah, I don't recognize.
I think today we'd probably just use shotgun mics, but I think that because they probably worked really well for the time that they had them. The only thing I think that really still from the 50s that I feel like really kept going is like ribbon mics. I mean, that we don't use them that often, but they were the things that were the most long lasting. Roscoe and then Jeffrey.
DJM 618 current link. You can buy them on Amazon.
There you go.
All right.
Current ones.
The current ones. Are they? Did they look the same?
No, they're much thinner and taller. But
well, JJ, we expect you to have one soon. Like next, how much are they?
Oh, and now I have to look at that link again. Hold on.
EJM 617. Interesting.
All right, Jeffrey and then Chris.
$43.95. They're not expensive.
Okay. All right.
The old one was is called the ECM 51A, and that's what the match game, and that's what Price is Right used.
Nice, Chris.
My favorite old television reference was when they used to take about 6 inches of what appeared to be wire coat hanger, stick it in a adapter for like live lip sync performances, and call it a wireless microphone. It was clearly not a wireless mic, but it had a little piece of wire sticking out of it.
Oh, that's funny.
So they could pretend it was fake, wireless.
Okay. Kept the theater going of the process. Yeah. Next question.
Jonas Telroyling in Germany says, how does Genlock work? Does it sync when a new frame is outputted?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
It works on a technical thing. In video, there's what's called black burst. Black burst is the timing start of a video frame. And so when black burst hits, a Genlock unit understands that from multiple sources and synchronizes the very first line of the black burst. Look up that in vertical interval, and you can go back and look at all the old engineering data.
Go to Jason and then Roscoe.
No, I defer. Bill's answer was perfect.
Yep. Roscoe.
Length of cable plays an issue there. So even though you're sending black burst out, you have to make sure you're using the same length of return cables to get it all to sync back up.
Next question.
JJ McKenna, Santa Venetia, please provide suggestions for a very simplistic voice recorder for a person with quickly degrading memory to record their recollections or memories that can then be transcribed with software.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Just press record for the iPhone is spectacular, and it makes use of iOS's built-in, completely not cloud-based if you don't want it to be transcription. That's straight away the best way to do it.
And JJ, do they have a phone? I mean, are they?
They,
is it something
they
that,
do,
would that be?
But they're old enough. They don't know how to use. They don't have iPhone. They can't use phones. I mean, it really needs to be like this simple. But even this is too complicated.
Right. Yep. Bill?
They need a button.
Yeah, Zoom makes a little H1 that's pretty inexpensive. I think it's like $89, and it's just you can hit the record button and it'll record and stop. And then it would take somebody with a little more technical sophistication to get the USB out of that into a computer to dump it. But for just recording audio and nothing else, that might be a way.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I have a Google Voice account, and I basically will do a text message straight to my Google Voice account.
Mickey?
Yeah, I don't have an Apple Watch, but is there a way to super simplify an Apple Watch so that the only icon on screen is a voice recorder?
Not really. I mean, I think that you could almost this almost gets into a Raspberry Pi project in the sense that you could build a button but I don't know how many people need it, but you could build a button that you have a box and you push the button and a light turns on, and you have a microphone connected to I could see how you could have a microphone connected to a Raspberry Pi, and you have a button on it, and you just push the button and it turns red, and you talk, and then you push the button and it turns and the light goes out and you're done. And it would be nothing. There's just push. But I think even what Bill's showing is too complicated. Like literally it needs to be. I understand what the question is, and I think it literally needs to be something that is a button that you push, not on their phone, like literally on a desk. There's a box. There's a button. There's a light. There's just that very simple. I'm going to hit record. And not have to have it. I think anything we think about with technique, I think would be difficult. With devices, I think will get complicated. Stephen?
Yeah, but Yountville at the Veterans Home, one of the techs there built essentially a Raspberry Pi, and it just, when somebody starts talking, it records it.
Oh, it just
no
listens
button,
for it.
no nothing. It just records. They have a history project director up there that pulled that together. And allows people when they start thinking, talk. And they've gotten
Courtney?
thousands of hours of really good information.
That's interesting. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, that voice activated is something that this doesn't have. This is the Zoom F2, which has a lot, and it just has one record button there, and that's all it does is record. So that would be pretty easy, and it records onto SD cards, so you can do that.
I think you could build a skill for the Amazon product that would do it, where you just say, "Hey, I want to say something," and it would start recording, and then it's already recording, but it could save that recording and send it somewhere. It could be something that could be voice activated, where it's not doing it all the time, but it's doing it when you call it out, and it's just in your room, and you just say, I want to do this.
So your personalized version of Hey Siri.
Yeah, we're not trying not to say those words so that we don't activate people's devices.
Yeah,
when any of us
Siri,
cut those off,
Google,
yeah, all those. Yeah, just like what you said. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
So there is one that let me cut to this on the Apple Watch that is one simple button. So you press it and it starts recording, and then when you're done, you tap it, and then you swipe to the left, and then there's the recording.
I will
Actually,
add that
cool.
is just press record on the Apple Watch.
Yeah,
that's it.
Well, I think something that feels analog would be the easiest thing. I mean, I almost feel like it's a switch, not even a button. It's like a switch. You go, and it switches up, and then you switch it down, or something that's just that simple. I mean, I can just think of my grandparents and how if I wanted them, if they were in their, I don't have any, my grandparents have passed, but the at that age, I can see how just having something that they feel like talking about and having something that's really manual, that's just switch up, switch down to do it would make the most sense. JJ and then Jeffrey.
And this is just like, I've had this question asked me many times now, like many over the years, folks who want to, because they're forgetting things, they want to just record something and have it transcribed for them because they've got all this information. So I'd love to have a real answer for this.
Yep. I think that there's in general, there's a business here somewhere for folks, only because, my kids started doing this thing where they interview their grandmother, my mother-in-law, and the stuff that she tells about her story, no one's ever going to remember that. But it's really something that's interesting. Like if when she talks about her childhood and her, and her and just her whole life, there's this incredible amount of information that unless you're really famous, everyone's just going to forget. And I think that there's to your point, I think that there's some really interesting opportunities there to capture stuff. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So Amazon does have amazon.com/transcribe. I put it in Mukana. It is a pay-to-play app, but they say that you can hook it up to your Echo to activate it and run it.
Next question.
Tommy Shantz, this is our last one that's not Mark's second hour. Just says control a slider for PTZ.
I'm afraid I don't understand the question. So might need to put a more detailed question in there. We'll come back to it again. We're going to move on since we're out of time, and I'm not clear what that one was. A little more context for tomorrow, and we'll answer it. So We're now changing gears. Some of us watched the parts. How many people watched the Grammys last night? Did anyone sit and watch all of it? Okay. I recorded it on YouTube and then scanned it. That's what I do. So I have most of the picture, but I think that TJ kicks this off with Grammy Award success, failure, discuss. So what did you guys think when you watched it? Go ahead, Bill, and then Sky.
So it kept me for the first probably 20 minutes with modest interest. I didn't catch the beginning of it, so I didn't catch Trevor Noah's walk on. But my opinion, and this was interesting, him as a host. First of all, I'm a huge fan of Trevor Noah. I think he's incredibly brilliant, and but I think they constrained him too much. I felt like they had him telepromptering almost exclusively and rushing to keep the pace of the show up because they knew it was going to be long. So it didn't feel like Trevor so much as it felt like an announcer version of Trevor, and I was kind of sad about that. The COVID-ification of it with the tent outside, distanced tables, and then the long walk inside to the performance stage felt a little uncomfortable to me. I don't know why they had to have it a block away. Maybe that's just a physical facility. The musical acts I thought were generally pretty good, and I love the fact that they did. It appeared a good bit of live. Some things, obviously, the BTS thing was taped in, but that's the thing that I've always admired most about the Grammys is you see performers who are very good at performing actually perform, and that's always been the major charm for me about it. As a TV show, I thought it was okay. It still didn't. I didn't watch the whole thing because it got to a point about halfway through where I just wasn't interested in the performers as much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
I kind of second all of that. In the live performance opportunity of watching the other performers watch the next act in the same room or environment, I appreciated that because they were appreciating each other. And so I enjoyed that from a performer's standpoint. Yes, I also am a big Trevor Noah fan. His ability, they didn't let him riff that much. They tried to constrain him, which good or bad. I was wondering, I think I did fall asleep at one point, and then I woke up and they had reset, at least up here in Seattle. So I think they play it twice back to back or something like that, because all of a sudden the sun was bright in the outside of Staples Center out there. And I'm glad they could do things outside. But again, my Taylor Swift is, I'm just a huge fan of her craftsmanship, and but then the handoff that they did to each other. So as a performer, I enjoyed it, watching people do what they do best.
You go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, the production side looked just like, if we were at a Grammys, doing the rooftop for the awards, doing the performances inside. They should have had a co-host. Trevor, yeah, bouncing back and forth was super hard for him, but having a co-host, they could have had things smoother, because it seemed that they did some awards and then they did like a ton of performances, and then they went back to some awards. So it wasn't really an awards show as it was a performance show, because there was a lot of stuff in that one song we can't talk about on this show where they had a bed and a shoe and stuff like that. That was great. But do they need to do it at the Grammys for that, taking up all that space? Because other bands are just sitting there on their instruments because they must not be able to move from their area, and they're watching, which was great to see those side shots, and on a side shot of Trevor Noah sitting down with I think it was Post Malone or whatever, and looking at that gives it a little bit more humanity. But it was just too clumped. Was the big thing.
You go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I think it was unique this time because they had this situation. They weren't inside Staples Center; they were at the convention center, and they built this huge wheel of stages. Like there were 5 stages built in a circle with the production in the middle. So they had crane in the middle and cameras in the middle that could shoot any of the 5 stages. And so generally the Grammys, have one stage and they have to deal with getting bands on and off, or they'll have 2 stages and they go between the 2. But they had 5 stages, plus they had the outdoor set, and the outdoor set was set up like a little cafe bistro, so that the award presentations and reception and award acceptance speeches were all outdoors on that patio rather than indoors in the performance areas. So there were two separate areas, and that allowed them a lot more flexibility to do more elaborate production on the stages that were inside the convention center. And I think I liked the video walls were used very well behind each one of the stages, either had lighting walls or video walls that they could put up a lot of very interesting backdrops. I think the Taylor Swift thing with the A-frame house and the forest behind them and the little firefly lights all over was quite interesting way they did it with a techno crane, and they had one of those if you looked closely you could see one of the 360 degree steady cams that will you can go from underslung to overslung with a rotating gimbal on it.
Is that the it's the Airy, right? The Trinity, I think.
Trinity, yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I thought the production value was pretty good and went very smoothly. And I think the reason Trevor Noah was so scripted was because the logistics of going from one stage to the next stage to the next stage. And it was interesting since there was no audience to cut to, they had to cut to the other performers that were just finished performing or getting ready to perform for their reaction shots to the other artists that were performing at the time. So that was the only cutaways they could really do because the people outside weren't seeing the performances except on a video screen.
I scanned it. I didn't watch the whole thing. I scanned through it. I didn't see any acceptance awards over Zoom or remote. It seemed like everybody who won was there. Oddly enough, how convenient.
That's true, yeah.
How convenient. They look so. What was funny is that they were all there and they all seemed so surprised that they won. I was like, like I don't know how. What are the chances? What are the chances that all the people would be there?
I did see a cutaway of a couple of people on a monitor that were in their homes or something, but they did not. Nobody won. That
no winners.
Yeah,
no winners. No winners were. I kept on looking for someone with an acceptance speech, over Zoom, and I didn't see any. And so I was like, what? I think they might have known that they had a pretty good chance when they got invited to actually be there. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah. The other nice thing I liked about it was the tribute to the local venues that are now shuttered because of COVID, where they actually did a prepared package on the Troubadour and a lot of and some of the places in Nashville and so on that are now shuttered, and they had them actually announce the winners.
I thought that was really nicely transformative to have the bartender announcing song of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, that was awesome. That really took it away from being too fancy. And I did say
the camera work I felt on the stage was actually better than most Grammys. The stage, because you don't have so many people.
You don't have to worry about blocking the audience's view, and you can roll a huge techno crane in there and get right on top of people with it.
Yeah. I was like, wow, these cameras look really good, and I was like, oh, it's because they're not constrained, by people. So I don't think people get how constraining a large crowd is to a camera setup if you're paying attention to the audience. And so it definitely, I felt like we got better, in many ways, better cameras in that realm. Next question.
Okay, this one is Grammys.
The one thing I will say that I did notice that is common is the macro blocking from the LED walls was pretty apparent for me, and some very little moire. They seem to be able to avoid the moire, but they definitely were getting that kind of chunky, cheap look that you get from LED walls that you can't quite see, but it just looks like it's like little squares back there because the compression. Now, I was watching it through through YouTube, so it might have been just YouTube doing it that way. It might have been okay in the broadcast, but it was definitely like LED walls really got to spend on them, or they don't turn out. Go ahead, Mickey.
I didn't see that. I think it was the LED. I think it was your YouTube compression.
Well,
you watched it live direct.
And you didn't see any. You didn't see the. I mean, if
blocking. No.
Yeah. Now go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just wondering if should we cut to some of the things we were talking about, or I'm just worried about getting pulled, possibly.
Yeah, we should probably be careful of it because they'll be pretty aggressive about this one. So I mean, having it, I think we probably won't cut to them in too much detail. We can cut and stop, so you can cut and stop stuff. It's when you play the video full screen is when it becomes problematic usually.
YouTube is doing something where they will actually cut out that copyright material. So, like for instance, with the TikTok one, those TikToks are all gone off of, but our
Nice.
video is
But
still there.
Did it cut it out automatically, or did it just give you the option to cut it out?
Yeah, we got the next day we got the message that basically said we're taking out this, and this because it violated copyright.
It said it said we're taking them out, or it just gave us a flag.
Yeah, it said it taken it. We blocked it out.
Does it truncate and edit, or does it just put a black hole over it?
I'm not sure. I didn't really look, yeah.
Next question.
Ranjan Chandil in Los Angeles has a couple of them. The first one, he says, Grammys Premiere Ceremony, the 2 hours pre-show looked incredible. Was this Unreal Engine? What is the redundancy setup to such a critical stream? Almost 1.1 million people were watching it on YouTube. And he has another question on the same thing.
Probably most of what was put onto those back walls was probably Unreal Engine. You know, like that I would guess that there's not that many other options. You know, if you're just doing video walls, you can get away with video walls. But if there's anything that is remarkable, any dimensionality at all, it probably was Unreal Engine, because Unreal Engine has a unique thing for all of these like real-time engines. It does 29.97, so it doesn't do. So Unity is a 30p, and a lot of the 3D things are 30p, and Unreal spent an enormous amount of money, or Epic spent a lot of money and time getting it to sync correctly with the cameras. And so that's why everyone's using it for broadcast. So my guess is that it was probably, now some of the 2D stuff could be a lot of different things, but I think that the 3D sets were probably Unreal or 3D, things. I don't think I looked through the pre-show in any kind of deep detail, but it could be there's so many screen solutions that we've talked about in the past, and I think we'd have to bring somebody on that actually worked on it to know for sure. Next question.
Ranjan is back with the Grammy Premiere Ceremony had the first few award winners on Zoom. The audio digitized heavily and sounded robotic. The first 4 winners had this happen. Where would this issue originate?
Wi-Fi. I mean, it's Wi-Fi. Like they didn't tell them to put it. But when you hear that kind of robotic sound and the breakup and the momentary breakups, that's it's just anyway, Chris.
Yeah, I was spotting through it this morning, and I thought, oh, what's going on with my system? And I started checking everything and changing audio paths, and then it came out of the. I was like, oh, it was just him.
Yeah, and that's usually an event company that really understands events just doesn't understand how to do a good connection to someone, because it doesn't have to be that way. Like it doesn't have to, especially for an event that big. I think that they don't need to have it break up like that. I think they just didn't put the groundwork in to make it work. Next question. They did the groundwork on a lot of things. I think it's probably one of the best ones we've seen so far. So I want to be fair to whoever was putting it together. It was a great production, but they just didn't do that groundwork. Next question.
Vincent Alvarez, Bellingham, Washington, says, during the In Memoriam segment, which I love, why would they sometimes put the dead person's name or band name twice on the screen at the same time? Drove me nuts.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think that was a design thing, and I think the cameras had the option to move, and I noticed that a couple of times where the name appeared on the left and right, and the camera might be shifting, and it stayed prominent when the camera moved right, so that the person was framed to potentially block the name. So I thought that was maybe a design thing to always make sure that the honorees in memoriam, their name was apparent.
No, I think I just didn't see that part when I was scanning through it. Next question.
Ranjan's back again with Cardi B's performance seemed to have AR, augmented reality, on top of the performance. How did they do this portion? With lots of money?
Yeah. So it doesn't take AR. Really what it is it's just a compositing technique. So basically what you're doing is live, we've talked a lot about a key fill output. You can have a background, and then you can have basically, let me see if I can draw this out here. If you think about, you have your LED wall here, and then you have a person that's here, this is all in camera. So you have the camera looking at it. But when this goes into the switcher, basically you're putting another layer of video over top in front. So it's not really AR as much as it is just another composite, so essentially if you think of it as the video frame, this is the bottom video frame, and then you're going to add another one. Now those two video frames are 3D. So what you're doing is if you have the back wall and the foreground, these can be in the same basically the same project, so that they can be integrated together. They look like they belong together, and but one is rendered out for the screen and one is rendered out for the foreground element with a key fill. So it's rendered out with an alpha channel, and then you can basically put 3D objects in front and behind the person without compositing. It's just you're just putting it on top. So putting graphics in front of someone live is not hard. Putting it in the LED is not hard because you just have the key fill, and you can have lots of semi-transparencies and everything else. It all works well. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, it's basically match move, but I mean, see how my hand's behind that? I mean, it's the same idea. It's basically just a downstream key, but you're match moving it. And
again, if the camera's locked off, it's super easy. If the camera is moving, what you're doing is there are motion capture systems. There are lots of sensor systems that can now lock that graphic in. That's what you're seeing with Mandalorian, where the background's moving with that person. You don't even have to do that part. If you just want to have the foreground pieces feel like they're there, you can still move the camera, and it's tracking where the camera is and where they should be, and then compositing them over top of the background. So anyway, it's become surprisingly easy to do. If you're doing it at home, it's easier to do it if you lock the camera off and not start moving the camera. Once you start moving the camera, it gets expensive to do it well. That's the big thing. But people have been doing it it gets expensive or complicated. So if you look at what Matt Workman's doing in Unreal Engine, what you're seeing there is him using simple HTC controllers that are literally locked to the camera. So the HTC controller, the thing that you would use to track, that tracking for games, can be attached to the camera. We've actually done it with Oculus controllers as well, where we attach the controller because they have so much data. You can attach them to the camera and actually have your 3D space moving with you as well. So those can be done. I haven't seen anybody put it out as a commercial product, but it can be done. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, the technology's been around for quite some time. I worked on a Disney project in about '92 where we had trackers on the camera that followed the Onyx reality rendering engine that was rendering stuff in real time. It wasn't very good, but
yeah, it's gotten to the point where it's really straightforward. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, they have this system that has an encoder on the lens for the zoom, but it also has an up-looking camera, witness camera, that's looking at the ceiling, and then they have targets that are barcode targets on the ceiling, circular barcode targets on the ceiling, and so it tracked complete in 3D space, and then they can just tie it into Unreal Engine, and you get all your perspective changes as the camera moves, tracked in real time.
And we've done it with mocap systems for the last 15 years. It's not like, that's like if you watch the Lord of the Rings behind the scenes, so that's a long time ago, you'll see Peter Jackson figuring out a handheld move, looking inside of a 3D space. So he's looking at the troll fight, the troll battle, a cave troll battle, and he's going like this and moving around, and he's seeing all of that in real time, moving that camera. That's all. We've been doing that for a long time. Go ahead, Chris.
So on the show, the Grammy show, was this set just a person standing on a little green set, or
no? They're in front of an LED wall.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the stuff around it was actually physical, I'm not 100% certain. It actually looks
that
rendered.
Grammy looks pretty fake.
Yeah, it's rendered. So it had kind of that. So it was probably one big LED wall that was there. Yeah.
I think they had one stage that had LED wall behind an LED floor,
right?
So that they could put images on the floor as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have an LED floor in my apartment.
I'd have to look at it. I don't have any cable connection. I haven't had one for a long time, so I don't know what it looked like uncompressed. I just know what it looked like through YouTube TV, and I was like, it just had that LED look that on YouTube TV, which isn't by far the most people watched it on regular TV. I think because YouTube only had 1.1 million viewers, but still it's 1.1 million viewers that are kind of Jeffrey.
Yeah, last week they had the Critics' Choice Awards, and they had a dual panel corner and a LED floor for their thing. I don't know if the Grammys used that or not, but that could have been it.
Yeah. Next question.
Vincent Alvarez of Bellingham, Washington says, any thoughts on the use of colorful coral-like flowers on set and in graphics, and thoughts about the award bumper with goldfish blooming flowers?
Go ahead, Bill.
So let's talk about art direction for a minute, because these award shows, that's one of the things that I think, like many of the crafts of production, get elevated in these big award show to a very high level. This was an amazing example of art direction. If you just look at things like Taylor Swift's set and the entire environment they created with her in the forest, and how they also contrasted that with the inside of the camera through the use of color and design. Look at how they did that with her. Look at the Billie Eilish thing. It was quoting her music video where the car is underwater. So the tonality of that whole thing was perfectly dialed in to feel like she was quoting the video, but living in live space and performing. Also, art directors who are really good at this understand the tonality of the music. In Billie Eilish's case, it's a sad, almost dirge-like song. So you had a very muted single color palette without a lot of pops of color. Now, move over to the other side of thing with Cardi B's energy. That whole electronic flashy thing was another form of art direction. I have tremendous admiration, having worked with art directors on some projects, of what they bring to the table. And if you have a project without somebody who's skilled at that, and then you have a project with somebody who is skilled at that, the elevation they can bring to visual display is stunning, because they take all those little details into consideration and do everything for every one of those artistic things the same way that we've seen people mixing sound.
Yep. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I was also reflecting back on the New Year's Eve experience and how horrible some of that lack of art direction was, and how blatantly it was just a product placement, experience. And even the Macy's Day Parade is a product placement. And a lot of these award shows end up being the platform by which to come watch our network, come watch our television shows, come watch our product placements. And so that's where I guess the artistry of last night, in the practical, not just the LED or the CG of it, but the practical theatrical experience that I think was, at least in the Taylor Swift thing, was she was physically on a set that was textural, and they did fiber little twinkle lights and things like that. So there was some 3D reality that I appreciated about it.
To go back to the actual flowers and the question, I thought that the 3D graphics flower that was opening on there was gorgeous. Like, it was just really, really well rendered. I mean, there's moments where you go, oh, that's really good motion graphics. And they definitely spared no expense with that. I thought it was a great render. Go ahead, Courtney.
I also like on that little, the transition to the award, or the nominee announcements that had that animation. I love the cello, the classical cello music that accompanied that was great too.
Yeah.
Even if they're doing, the hip hop award, the introduction was classical cello, and I really like that. I also liked the lighting design really tied into the set design. They stayed with yellows and warm colors for all the opening acts, and I really appreciated the lighting design.
Yeah, no, I think that, and it was really well tied together. I think it felt the least weird of all the awards that we've seen so far. I mean, there was some stuff about it that was like little whatever, but the other ones have just felt like, wow, somebody just took a lot of drugs and then designed something and thought that this would be a good idea. And this one was like, I think they've had time to watch other people's award shows. I think it's worth us looking at it for the same reason. They had time to think about it. They had time to watch everybody else's and think of something. I think that there's places that they could have done better, but I think that, again, they had a little bit more time to work on it. And but I think it also shows that they made this decision a long time ago. This wasn't something like they waited until the last. What we really see hammering people is everyone. I mean, you're in these discussions with folks, and they're going back and forth. Are we going to do physical? Or are we going to do digital? Are we going to do physical? Or are we going to do digital? And when they go digital, they just throw it up there because they thought that they were going to be able to go physical, and they just didn't want to. The Grammys, obviously, if you look at the design of this, they decided some I don't know when it is, but I bet you they decided last summer that they were going to do this. Like it was like not a like it wasn't like the last month or two that they did this. Go ahead, Courtney, and then Chris.
And this will probably never happen again because the space that they set it up in, the LA Convention Center, of course, has been dark because of COVID. So they had weeks to set up the stage and rehearse all the acts and rehearse all the moves and rehearse everything over and over again. Unlike the Staples Center where, there's a basketball game in there the week before and they only have 3 days to go in and set that thing and rehearse it. So they had a lot more time to rehearse.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I think part of what we might be seeing is that as we get deeper into COVID and maybe coming out of it, is that in general, a lot of us are getting a lot better working remotely. So if you went back 10 months, everybody's like scrambling. You have like the graphics departments are working on their laptops at home. And I think that possibly part of what we're seeing is people are deeper into this issue, have learned how to work as a team remotely. Maybe they've built up their infrastructures. I know that we at Slice, we're a lot better at this today than we were a year ago. And I think that when you look at the what Bill was talking about, what Courtney was talking about was the visual consistency and the art direction. It's a team of people possibly working remotely, and maybe they're back at the office with masks on, who knows? But it's very possible that some of us are just getting better at doing this and we can up our game a little.
Well, I think I think we're going to continue to see that progression, and the longer COVID keeps us from having large events, the better we're going to get at it. And then at some point, it's going to be hard. I feel like with some of these, it's going to be hard to go back to what we had before because in some cases the production values are better. I think that the Apple keynotes and the Frame.io keynote specifically is a lot easier to watch than someone on stage. Like it was a lot easier to just as a viewer to watch it than going there. And so I think that it's tighter. It's just more, so I think that's going to be an interesting puzzle as we kind of wrap back to it. Go ahead, Sky.
I'm just curious, just in watching some of the images that are coming out, I bet you I'm curious if the LA Convention Center, said, come on in, we want you to advertise for us, and the Staples Center in the backdrop, that those shot angles were not by accident. So I'm just curious if they.
I think they probably just wanted to show that they were in LA and that they're near the Staples Center. I don't think that they need those facilities are so busy that they don't need any.
Really? Even now?
Any help. No, not now, but there's nothing to be done now. As soon as
that's why the relevance of the question is that
I think they're just showing that
we're still relevant. We're still here.
Hey, March Madness time, the basketball is relevant right now.
Well, it is. I think, to your point, keeping them in memory right now of like they're still around. That they're, but no, and what I mean by that is that that hey, we didn't just do this all virtually. We did it in LA, near where we normally do it. I think that's probably what they were trying to show there, is that we didn't just go we just didn't do it all in a studio a lot. Which is, I admit, what I would have done. Like I would have looked at all the permits and everything else of being down there. Then I've worked in that area a lot. And I'd be like, oh, let's just go do this in a big soundstage. like somewhere, why are we here? So that's a design feature that they are better at than I am, because I wouldn't have wanted to deal with the detail if I didn't have to. Next question.
Jason Panks of Nashville says, what is macro blocking? There's a typo there. So if you're looking at the question later.
Go ahead, Jason.
You ever seen Minecraft? That's basically macro blocking.
No.
The idea is much, much larger blocks of what should be a smoother grain of color.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of macro blocking.
Noise.
Yeah. So essentially, what's happening is that the algorithm is trying to group colors together that are like each other. These colors are like these ones, these colors are like, because they can make it smaller. If I know a whole bunch of them are like this color, so it tries to block them together, and the design you're getting is showing off the algorithm of how it's getting grouped, because it's supposed to be invisible to you. And if you change the contrast a little bit, if you change, and if it gets pushed too hard, it stops being invisible and you start seeing these blocks. And where you'll see them a lot is around, like if you watch streaming, the best one is the night battle scene in Game of Thrones is still really macro blocked. So it's a great example of it, because dark areas is not what it's good at. Because it's perceptual. So we don't have a lot of things that are really dark all the time. So the compressor is just kind of, if you get dark, it just goes, oh, you don't want to see that, and it just pushes it down to black. And so you'll start to see these blocks that go along people, or in dark areas, or in areas that have smooth gradients, can oftentimes pick that up. Go ahead, Chris.
By that logic, if you were to turn off your teal color light behind you, would your image quality go up because the encoder doesn't have to render the could block out the background as a solid color more easily?
It might get a little better. I mean, it could. It's already pretty simple. Like that's the thing that what happens is when you have a lot of detail, it also has to take that into account. So so
that's why my flag only has 13 stars and not 50.
It's all for the macro blocking.
It's all for the macro block.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Jason.
I brought this up earlier, and I'm hoping it's going to show what I'm looking to show. Do you see that banding? That's the Web Presenter HD. That is a brand new thing doing 1080, and that's a pretty good example of macro blocking, even on modern hardware.
Yeah, and that's just and that's to some degree stair stepping. Anytime you have a super slow move from one, even an 8-bit uncompressed, you'll see stair stepping in that area. So there's some, this is a good example. What Guy's showing there is a good example of what will break up in macro blocking. You can see kind of not obviously they're blowing squares around, but you'll see that he's getting kind of chunky, and not when it stops as much, but as in other things there. So yeah. Who is that again? He's really good. I can't think of his name at the moment. I don't know him well enough to.
Yeah, his explanation of data rate is spectacular. If you ever want to understand how compression works, he did a really good. That might actually be it. Oh yeah, there it is. The data rate at the bottom. Great explanation.
Yeah.
The Tom Scott. Yeah, it's great. Great channel. He's really good at that. They show some of the. I don't know if he does it on all of them. He did one on all the copyright stuff within YouTube. He did like a 45-minute piece that I watched that was just amazing. And then they showed some of the behind the scenes, and you realize he's got a Steadicam operator and everything else. I mean, he's a big YouTuber, but there's a lot of work that goes into those. And he's as close to his channel. I know we're getting a little off in a rat hole, but his channel is probably as close to Connections as I've seen, as far as like quality of what that stuff looks like. Next question.
Jason Mills, San Francisco Bay Area, and the panel occasionally. I'm running an online awards ceremony live stream in May with about 20 pre-recorded acceptance clips and 5 live presenters. What CDN or delivery platform leads itself to a fun and interesting awards ceremony?
Go ahead, Jason.
Akamai is pretty stinking good, and Vimeo, as in cahoots with Akamai, does a really, really good job if you want it to be nice and clean.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
The host. I hate to say it, but award ceremonies, the energy, and having been to a lot of those banquet type awards ceremonies before COVID and all those years, whoever's guiding it from the stage is all about the energy that evening is all about. So its hosting is like 90% of it. The rest of it is the last 10, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Next question.
Alton Christensen of Brooklyn, the RoboCams on stage, do you think they were run manually or programmed? Then he has a 10-second link from Google there. So if it's still up.
Trying to. Those are. I now I see it. Those they are capable, and I'm not sure which ones that were used there. But those are, so those are really popular in news. I might be able to pick it up. I can't quite pick up the logo on the side there, at least on the one that you have posted there. It may be Mark Roberts, heads. but I'm not 100%. I just can't quite make out the text. Anyway, those can absolutely be pre-programmed, but most likely they were probably triggered with they have a bunch of moves that they're capable of, and you just trigger which ones you want when you want them. I doubt it was all one way or the other. Like it was probably not a person with a joystick, but it probably also wasn't. It was probably a bunch of moves that are pre-programmed that go to here, go to here, go to here, and it has motions. Those are really popular. Those types of heads are really popular in news organizations. They used to have a bunch of camera operators. Almost every news thing that you see now is a PED, a robotic PED that has pre-programmed locations that it goes to make that work. And it just rolls around. These ones look really nice.
I'm
Mickey?
surprised at how small the pedestals on those are, because that usually used to take a big set of trucks and a big center column, and that you just showed was like, it looked like a piece of 2-inch pipe coming up to the camera.
They're
really
a little bigger than that. They're a little bit bigger than that, but it's still, it's interesting. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just curious, like for a show like this, why would you pre-program the positions?
Well, because you have performances that have been rehearsed, so you know where they're going to be, and so you would, we've done a lot of work with pre-programming for stage shows, where if as long as they hit their marks, especially when they're just standing and playing, if they stay near their spike, you build the camera moves so that because then you can get it just right, and so you usually have a handful of 1 or 2 operators that are doing whatever that they'll react to things. But like big sweeping camera moves, a lot of times, especially on the ground, we will pre-program those, so that we don't have to, because we know that we want to get that sweeping shot for that moment in the song. Why would we do it by hand? Like, why would we, when you can rehearse it over and over again, or you can just program it and do it.
And specifically with the Haim sisters, they had a thing where the young lady who's the drummer and the singer gets up, walks out, plays guitar for a while out front. Her sister takes over on drums. Then she goes back. So the actual focus shifted around. So I think those pedestal cameras would be a beautiful way to get enough angles to cover that appropriately.
Yeah, go ahead, and Courtney.
Yeah, because I think there was timecode driving the tracks, and because all the video backgrounds were synchronized, because there were beats, lighting beat changes on beats and everything. So everything was very, very tightly synced. So I think everything was being driven off of master timecode tracks, and of course it's easy then to tie in a pedestal move to that timecode track and be very precise and hit the mark every time.
And it tends to be how a lot of people work with these pedestals. Again, when you look at how they're built, when they're built for broadcast in the US, there's like one person hitting cues for telling the pedestals where to go. And they're not driving the pedestals with a joystick. They're just saying, go to A, go to B, do this move, do this, do this, do this. And those are all cached into it. And again, to Courtney's view, some of the stuff that we've been doing has been timecode driven. So I just need you to be at this point at this time. And if the performers are, where you expect, especially big sweeping shots, you just know that in that moment in the song, I want it to be going around like that. The performers have a lot of wow and flutter that can happen with where they are, and you're still going to get a great sweeping shot. But more and more people for live performances here, at least, are going more and more motorized. And then you have a handful of handheld people and close-up cameras that are grabbing the magic moments that you didn't know were going to be there. But even like jib shots that we've been doing, I mean, they would be better if they were remote control. Like, the jib shots are great. We have great jib operators, but they have to rehearse over and over and over again. Whereas instead we could program it and we get that perfect shot for that part of the song, especially when bands are playing to click tracks. So if a band is playing to click tracks and they're against a set thing, the click track is going to take them to the same place at the same time, and it's just a matter of them being where they're supposed to be. So that's more of a performer issue. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I mean, I get that the actual music and lights and other visuals that are being played out are definitely, for the Grammys at least, played out via timecode. But I guess, like, if I were directing it, and I think a lot of directors that I've worked with, they would, I think, hate to be locked in shot wise. But I guess it's a style thing. Like, if if you're okay to be like on the show and not have much control in terms of flexibility with the shots, then yeah, I guess
Yeah, I mean,
it depends.
it depends. It just that when you have a stage show here, and it depends on how many people are viewing it, and you just want it to be the hardest part with live shows is making it clean, like is getting a clean shot. And so like with Eurovision, I know that their whole thing is they have to there's still camera operators doing it, but it's all the cuts are all automated. Like what cameras, and they're rehearsing it inside of those cuts. I mean, and before that, it was all someone calling it out. Go to camera 3, go to camera 4, go to camera. But they're reading off of a script. There was a person reading off of a script of this is how we want this show to go. And what's happening is that reading off of that script is getting more and more just given to a machine to do it, because they were just reproducing something that they knew was going to work. Michael,
could you, and maybe I should do this on Discord, it would benefit people like me if you could show, like you talk about a clean shot. Okay. Show me what that means in how you envision it. Show me those things.
It's
if
mostly
you put together a time slot or
yeah, I mean, we'd have to set it up. We have to kind of set it up. But the
I don't mean today.
is that the issue is with live, when we talk about clean or not clean, is like, to get that great shot, you have to tell the jib operator a couple shots before, I need you to start your move, and then they start doing the move, and then you cut to it. But you had to think about that 3 or 4, I'm going to have you go from low to high. I need you to, do that, do this move. And as you rehearse that concert, like especially for a lot of these, they're playing that one song over and over again. Like what we saw there, they're going to play that all day. The rehearsal for that band was probably all day for each band, like all day for them to play through that as they figure out the best places to put all the cameras and everything else. And so the thing is they're now rehearsing with a human that may forget, may not get it just right, may be a little slower than they were the last time, or they do it with a machine that does it exactly the way they told it to do it. It's the same amount of creativity. It's just at a different point in time. So right. The creativity happens ahead of the show, because you can get much more creative, because you can create very complex moves that are impossible to do with humans. Like, I mean, that's the thing, that when you start adding a bunch of arms to it, you can layer them on top of each other. And then once that one's done, you don't have to think about it anymore. Like, it's going to do it exactly the same way every single time.
Right. I mean, I get used, like I was a dolly grip for quite a while. So, I had to count in my head. I had to do certain things in a time, for what the DP wanted. And I get that, but
the thing is that
was a while ago. And number one, number two, I think it helps because we use all these terms,
right.
I think it helps to have some sort of visualization of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, like a clean shot is just, I mean, yeah, and you're right. It just takes a lot of setup to try to show one, but a clean shot is really that you're coming to every shot at its perfect moment. Like not at, when you do it live, when we cut it in post, we can cut to the best camera shot, and we can cut to a wide when we didn't have one, and we can cut to a lot of other things. When you're doing it live, especially in a concert, you're going to cut to something, and that person, the camera wasn't in quite the right place. And that's kind of seen as like the wow and flutter of a live event, but it's, people.
And I swear as an operator, you can feel when it's right and when it's not. But you get so used to it, you feel, when you've hit your mark and your timing, and when you have.
Well, and there's some shots like handheld. Even the stuff that we're doing where we're automating a lot of that stuff, the handheld stuff is still a person, because they're capturing some moment that just happens to be there. It's not a matter of getting rid of people. It's a matter of focusing on just the ones that. Just the talent that matters, that needs to be organic. Go ahead, Chris, and then Mickey.
Yeah, for me, like I think I get like with the actual, a track and possibly boom up and down of a pedestal, but definitely like the head itself.
No, a lot of those are still done by a person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then,
The close-ups. So the close-ups and the handhelds are still done by a person who's reacting. The close-ups, because that artist is never going to be exactly in the same place again. It's the big complex moves. So what was being caught with those motorized PEDs that they show going around it are wide, typically wide moving shots. You know, when they cut to them, they're doing, you know, kind of an establishing shot. When they cut to the, you know, the jib shots might have been jib shots, but, you know, because when you get really big arms, they don't automate them as much. So so I to your point is the big establishing shots are the kinds of things you can have a machine do. But yeah, absolutely capturing a person and getting the right moment and getting the organicness close up and of hands and things like that. I haven't seen anybody. I mean, what we want to do is have more cameras that are automated, have the same number of camera operators that are just doing, not having to do the stuff that, you know, that those other cameras become something that we don't have to think about. You know, they're just doing what they're told to do. And then you have the same number of camera operators you had before, but they are just focused on the close-ups and all the special shots. You know, they're not doing any of the establishing shots anymore. I mean, that's what we're trying to move to in a lot of the shows that we're doing is, you know, what can you get out of the way and you still have the same crew size. You're not trying to get down to no crew. Well, some people are. Some people we work with are definitely trying to get down to no crew. But when I think about it, I feel like you can't. It's the same thing about automating editing. You know, there is the real power is when you can mix a human and a machine together and let the human implicitly control it rather than explicitly control it. And then you get the fine elements from the machine. Anyways, Sky.
Well, and to your point, robotics are best at repetitive tasks, but the organic in the moment experience. I love somebody's use of the word effervescent. The bubbles only come out in one sequence at one time. So to have that ability to, and then again, the task is to capture that. We happen to be there at that right point at that right time, which doesn't always happen. But you can try.
And as the expense of a lot of this stuff keeps on dropping, I think we're going to see, you know, what's really interesting though is artists being able to do it by themselves from their house. You know, like there's a lot of people that are already doing performances like that with still cameras, with cameras locked off. But I think that there's, you know, more and more artists that are figuring out how to put 20 cameras in. Eventually these arms are not going to be very expensive. They're already getting down to $1,000, $2,000 each. And there's artists experimenting with that. And what they can do, again, an artist with a click track, if you look at like what Victor is doing with, you know, his stuff where he's got QLab cutting everything for him. He's got graphics popping up. He's only one little step away from, here you can see what we were talking about there. See, it's actually guiding the edit. And again, some of this is already pre-programmed. If you look at how they're timing it, that's the edit. So that's a good example. And that's, I think, a little bit ago. Yeah, it's 3 or 4 years ago. But I sat down and ended up spending like an hour talking to someone at IBC about, they do the Eurovision edit. So they were talking about the whole thing. You just get it, you pre-edit the whole thing, you know, and it's all, now they still have camera operators, but the camera operators know, you know, they either get good at knowing where they have to be at every moment, and then they're doing that fine adjustment to make it look just perfect. But they have to be at a shot in that kind of system. And you're only one step away from, and some of these big moves, those are all done with a machine. So you can just do things much more complexly, in a much more complex way. Next question.
Alton Christensen of Brooklyn says the short bio pieces about the artist had a huge amount of post and visual effects, and well done, I thought. Anyone know anything about the 23-year-old, I believe, who directed them? The kid's got a future.
I don't. Let's find him. Get him on here. If someone knows him, let's have him talk about what he did. You know, it's probably next generation. I didn't really see a lot of those buildups. I think I was scanning through for the event, so I'll have to go back and take a look at them. Next question.
Vincent Alvarez, Bellingham, Washington, said when Taylor Swift was announced as the winner, they cut away for 2 full seconds of a blurred wide shot, maybe covering something inappropriate. Is there a better safety net that is not as awkward?
I don't know. I didn't see that.
It didn't strike. I think I was watching. No, I watched a performance of her. I don't think I watched her get her award. So
it'd be interesting if we can find what that is. But generally, it's either someone made a huge mistake and they can't. Let's see. Then it cuts away. She wins. She's looking up. There's the reaction. People clapping.
And just so everyone knows, I'm not cutting to it because
It'll get us in.
It'll get us in trouble.
We'll get in trouble there. I don't see it. So I'm not.
They may have cut it out because I watched
remember seeing it live.
I watched it happen live last night. But yeah, right about there, and it was just this horrible like security cam shot. But they may have cleaned it up in post. That happens.
If you're watching the one on YouTube, that's absolutely possible. So what we'd have to do is go back and look at the one. When is that? Well, we'll find out. We'll look at it later. But my TV.YouTube record, it could very well have it, and then the YouTube video may not have it. It
was definitely there. So
it is.
But it's not.
It's very possible. It's very possible to do an edit, to re-edit something and then get it up to YouTube, and have even under the same URL. It's not impossible to do that.
Hey,
but you have to have an enormous amount of juice.
Did like me anybody notice the you didn't win shots? They did tend, if there were 5 nominees and they were all there, as soon as they spent a couple of seconds on the shot of the winner being happy, suddenly they would go to 2 or 3 people who didn't win. And I just thought that was an interesting thing. I mean,
well, they do that. I mean, they do that all the time. I mean, they always show the other folks. I mean, that shows them being a good winner, and people want to know how they reacted.
But they were in their homes, and they were somewhere in Nashville or somewhere in Glendale or something.
I think that they had to show
they were dressed up too. By the way, they weren't in their pajamas.
Yeah, or their sweatshirt. Yeah, I think that was poorly planned. I think that, I mean, they do that. I think it probably feels weirder when you go to their house and see it than it does when they're, but if you think about an award show, they cut to those folks all the time.
Yeah, I know. It's an interesting thing. And I just wonder why directors, you're right. It's like, be a good loser, but
it's part of the game.
It's a weird thing.
Yep.
Well, they don't have an audience to cut to, so that's the problem. The only people that they have to cut to,
there you go,
are the other nominees that are in the room.
Right.
Yeah.
Next
so
question.
What does Post Malone do? You can just sit there and happily applaud. Jason Panks, Nashville, is our next question, and my mouse is in the wrong person, so let me push the button here before I go any farther. There we go. Speaking of timecode, is SMPTE still the most used program? Lights, camera, band, click, trike, and so forth. Are there other ways to do the same thing?
Oh, there's so many ways to do the same thing. But anyway, go ahead, Jason, and then Roscoe.
Oh, there are so many ways to do this that it is its own hour. I mean, I'm not kidding. It is its own hour. But yes, I think the Society of Motion Picture, what is it? SMPTE.
Television engineers. Motion picture and
television engineers. In Hollywood, without question, it's the standard.
And we shorthand it as SMPTE timecode, but there's all sorts of different parts of that specification.
Right.
That's all.
Right. Yep.
Well, the idea is that SMPTE can also drive all these other show control, QLab. They can all look at a SMPTE signal and then send out all the other DMX signals. All these protocols that we've talked about can all be triggered through apps based on SMPTE timecode.
And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the infrastructure of the clocking is well known. So you have word clocks, you have things that are basically putting out, you have hardware that does the thing, right? And so you have a lot of hardware that can sync everything together. And you have hardware that knows how to listen for that and to take those cues, and hardware, so the fact that it's well established, there's other protocols that you can use to make that happen. You could, I know some people that do some of this with DMX, but then they tie the DMX back into the SMPTE time code, but because you need something that's solid, because you're talking about being accurate to the frame and needing everything to happen. Now, the other thing we've gotten into is the issue with, Mickey, you might be able to answer. Is it, I was told that it's difficult. I mean, do you mostly work in 2398 as far as in Pro Tools? Does Pro Tools care?
Yeah. Well, if it's something that's designed for film, if the material is in 2398, we run it at 2398. But from what I know, in the live setting, most people run at 30.
Yeah,
in terms of even for controlling lighting boards, and also for controlling like playback machines.
By
Right.
30, he means 2997.
And you mean 2997, right? Yeah. Yeah, because I was told that there's some tools that are now really focused towards 2398 because we just in the US we don't. What's interesting is that TV was at 2997 for a long time. So if you were shooting TV shows with video cameras, you were shooting 2997, but the whole film world was still 2398. And when HD came through and we stopped shooting with video and we went to HD, then a lot of things just moved to 2398. Because
the film world was 24, not 2398, and then they had to when they went to HD, then they adopted native 2398. But everything was done pull down through telecine prior to that because it would come in at 24 even, and they'd have to do 3.2 pull down to get it down to 2398.
Right. Well, to get to 29.7, right? But Bill and then Mickey.
Yeah. That whole pull up and pull down thing it's still out there, but I think essentially in the early days, as I remember it, of DV, it was so hard to compress video images and get them across the internet that difference between 2997 and 2398 was a significant data savings. And so most of the digital stuff, you needed that extra 20%.
It's how we got into this mess in the first place. Was a bunch of people that didn't want to buy celluloid. They're like, "How low can we go before we don't, and before people start complaining?" And it turned out about 24 frames a second is how low we can go. So our entire industry is driven from a bunch of cheapskates in the 20s.
Silver oxide's expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Mickey, you were gonna say something, and then Roscoe.
Yeah, like just to build on what Courtney was saying. Yeah, it was because back then, when they did the actual cutting of film, instead of cutting negatives, they moved into digitizing them, the telecine process, which put the negatives into 2997 videotape, and that was what was cut. So during the post sound process, we just stuck to that same frame rate, 2997. But then when they did the print from the original negatives, that's when the whole pull down and subsequent pull up had to be done.
Yeah, and just to be correct, I just noticed he said lights. Lights still use DMX mostly. I don't think they use SMPTE timecode. No, you can cross-pollinate, but
lights are DMX systems are driven off of a time base, which is the time code. So that starts the triggered programming, and then the DMX can signals go out to all the lights, but they're being
driven by time.
Point in time is
the DMX is telling the lights what to do, but it's being cued by time code.
Yeah, so but he says to program lights, and so if you're trying to find some SMPTE thing that programs lights, it is that translation to DMX that does that. So yeah, I just didn't want to mislead somebody.
Yeah, go to Roscoe.
Oh, Mickey covered it, but basically, the reason we have 2398 is because when film got transferred to video, the video people were too cheap to run it at 30, so they kept it at 2997, which meant the audio world also had to clean up its act by going to not 24, but 2398.
There's probably a whole hour there of talking about. Well, we have a request to talk about frame rate, so we'll have frame rate. This we just have to get the right people in, and we'll have a conversation about that.
It's very technical, color subsampling and all sorts of weird things.
Let's just do 25, please. 25 works.
It's
120.
Oh my God.
You integer boys always have it right.
I remember a whole year of me being confused when I was learning video.
All right.
This stuff.
Okay. Anyway, thanks everybody. Great questions to the from the audience. Thank you very much for your participation and keeping the show going, keeping us moving forward, and great panel today. So thanks, guys. And it's good seeing everybody. Hopefully, we'll see you all tomorrow, and maybe even in a couple seconds, because we're going to go ahead and cut this one off and jump into the post show. All right, bye, guys.